The relationship between police and ordinary Americans is at a breaking point. Decades of pent up anger have spilled into the nation's streets as people express their outrage over the killing of George Floyd in May. Face down on the street, handcuffed and unresisting, while Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin slowly suffocated him to death with his knee. What does the future of citizen-police interactions look like in America? And is there any way to repair the growing divide between police and the citizens they're sworn to protect? It's impossible to say for sure. After all, some relationships can become damaged beyond repair. But to have any chance of healing the rift between police and an increasingly fed-up population, we must try to figure out where things went so wrong. Only then can we begin trying to fix the situation. There are four fundamental pathologies in the relationship between citizens and police. One old, and three that are new. The old one is the way police, and indeed the criminal justice system generally, treat black and brown people worse than white people. Systematic racial disparities in our criminal justice system are real, and they cause a great deal of resentment, and rightly so. Many groups, including the NAACP, the ACLU, and Black Lives Matter, have been working tirelessly to address that problem, and they're making progress little by little. While the three new problems I go into below receive less attention, I think they're worth discussing because they make everything about citizen-police interactions worse, including the racial divide. So what are they? The three problems are unconstitutional overcriminalization, predatory policing, and the routine use of deceit as an investigative tactic. We'll discuss them in turn. In order to understand what unconstitutional overcriminalization means, we have to start with a basic question. What is the proper role of criminal law in our system? The answer is this. The essence of criminal law is to prevent people from engaging in conduct that harms others and/or threatens the very fabric of civil society. Things like murder, theft, and violent assaults. Notably, every criminal law is backed by the implicit threat of state violence, which is to say that the government will use force to make you stop doing what the law forbids and punish those who deserve it. Therefore, to be legitimate, the scope of criminal law must be quite narrow. It may only forbid conduct that genuinely harms or threatens to harm others. But much of America's criminal law is illegitimate because it prohibits all kinds of non-harmful conduct, such as personal drug use, which, however inadvisable it may be for certain people, simply does not justify the use of state violence to prevent it. Among the negative consequences of criminalizing non-wrongful conduct that a substantial portion of the population wishes to engage in, and will continue to engage in despite the prohibition, is that it makes encounters between citizens and police much more dangerous for both sides. Citizens face the risk of arrest and incarceration for engaging in conduct that should never have been criminalized in the first place, while police are stuck with the fact that some people will try to fight their way out of the situation, rather than allow themselves to be arrested for a bogus crime. Overcriminalization is intimately connected with, and helped give rise to, the second relatively modern problem with citizen-police interaction, which is predatory policing, aka policing for profit. Simply put, most police officers are expected to generate revenue for their city or state by issuing traffic tickets, citations, and civil forfeiture, a legal device that enables police to seize cars, cash, and even homes simply by alleging the property was somehow involved in crime, but not actually proving it. Indeed, many cities actually include police-generated revenue in their budgets, which in turn puts pressure on individual officers to make sure they bring in a certain amount of money in the form of fines, fees, and forfeitures. That incentive structure has a predictable effect on priorities, causing police to shift their attention from important crimes like rape and murder and focus instead on handing out traffic tickets and seizing drug money. The third and final problem we'll discuss gets far less attention than it should, and that is the use of deceit as a routine tool of law enforcement. Unlike their European counterparts, American police have enthusiastically embraced deceit as a legitimate investigative tool, which means U.S. cops routinely misrepresent the law, misstate facts, invent statements from non-existent witnesses, and engage in all manner of chicanery in the hopes of eliciting useful information. As a result, it is difficult to trust anything an American police officer says to you, because you can never be sure whether they're trying to trick you into saying something incriminating. Needless to say, this has a devastating effect on people's perception of, and their willingness to trust and cooperate with, members of law enforcement. So what can we do about unconstitutional overcriminalization, predatory policing, and lying cops? Simple. We can act accordingly by protecting ourselves and each other at all times when interacting with police. For starters, we must recognize that there are so many laws so badly written that it's impossible to know whether you may have inadvertently committed a crime for which you're being investigated. Nor may you trust any assurance you receive that you're not a suspect, because police lie about that and anything else that might assist their investigations all the time. And finally, you must assume that every cop you see is under at least some pressure to generate revenue by issuing citations and forfeiting people's property. Why not yours? So what does this mean in practical terms? Here are 4 concrete changes we can and should implement in citizen-police interactions. While the first 2 are actions private citizens can take, the latter 2 speak to changes at a societal level and capitalize on the very technology that makes these interactions ever more visible in the first place. They do and would require significant behavioral shifts, but that should not deter us from trying to prompt change. First, you should refuse, as you have the right to do, to answer any questions or cooperate with any police officer unless they sign a legally binding document to the effect that nothing you say can or will be used against you. Second, you should refuse to assist or otherwise interact with any police officer unless they likewise agree to waive qualified immunity, a judge-made legal doctrine that makes it nearly impossible to sue police officers, even when they have indisputably violated your rights. Any cop who refuses to be held to the same standard of accountability as you is a cop who does not deserve your cooperation. Third, we can ensure that all interactions between citizens and police are recorded, and we can change the rules of evidence to provide any unrecorded statements are inadmissible in court. Ideally, we should develop technology to ensure that the decision whether to record, as well as control over the subsequent recording, lies with the citizen and/or a third party, not with the police. Things are moving in the right direction. If you have an iPhone, a new shortcut created by a Reddit user enables you to simply say, "Hey Siri, I'm getting pulled over," and your phone will begin recording. Fourth and finally, we should develop a smartphone app to deliver free, live legal counsel to citizens during any involuntary encounter with law enforcement, such as a traffic stop, in order to help people to exercise their rights and resist deceitful efforts to manipulate them into saying or doing things such as consenting to a warrantless search, that are not in their best interests. This may seem like a heavy lift, but in reality it's nothing more than a technical challenge, particularly in a country with as many lawyers and technologists as we have here in America. And while some may question whether police would permit a suspect to use their phone to access such an app during an interview, there's a very strong argument that the right to do so is protected by both free speech and right to counsel provisions in the First and Sixth Amendments. In conclusion, while it's unfortunately true that the relationship between citizens and police has never been worse, there's no reason it has to stay that way. Once we identify the key underlying dysfunctions and take steps to ameliorate them, we can help ensure a more level playing field during interactions between citizens and police. And when people feel more confident that they'll be treated fairly by police, indeed, when they feel confident that they will have the power to insist on being treated fairly by police, then the relationship will begin to heal itself.